Picking winners with the Cheezeman, NFL Survivor 2023. If you're coming back from last year, we're glad you're back. If you're new, we're glad you're here. Hopefully you will like us and subscribe to the channel all year long. We talk about NFL Survivor as well as making plays throughout the year of the NFL. Let's get right into this. Today's show, we're going to do a quick review of last year. We'll talk about some Survivor gameplay and strategy just in this first week's video. We'll show you some key Survivor statistics to be aware of. Week 1, some specific stats. Week 1 Survivor picks, and then finally we'll do my 5 picks to play. Although week 1's always a scary week, but let's get right into it. You can see here last year we had 1,954 entries. 2 people split the championship trophy, made it all the way through not only the regular season, but this pool goes through the playoffs and the Super Bowl. What happens is you get to pick every team one time through the regular season. Then in the playoff Super Bowl rounds, you get each team one more time. If you do not use a team during the regular season, you can use them twice. During the playoffs and Super Bowl, a couple years back, I did that with New England and won this pool when Tom Brady came back and beat the Falcons. And I had saved New England throughout the regular season and was able to use them twice in the playoffs, and that helped get the victory. Okay. Now, for last year, take a look at how much of a dum-dum I was. You can see, and for those of you who followed along, the very few of you at the end, you saw I made my picks even after I lost in Week 16. I chose Tennessee instead of San Francisco. And in my thinking there, I was going, well, if I have San Francisco twice during the playoffs, that should help me. Actually, it wouldn't have at all, so it was a big mistake. But you can see there, had I picked San Francisco instead of Tennessee, I would have made it all the way to the end. Would have been a 3-way split. So there's my gift to the 2 winners. You didn't have to split it 3 ways. You got to split it twice. You're welcome. This year, though, I'm getting there, all right? So here we go. Let's talk a little bit more about it. If you want to play Survivor, hit me up. You can email me at mcheezeman@gmail.com or put your email address in the comments below, and I'll send you information on how you can join a Survivor pool. They're a lot of fun. They're a blast. And if you don't know how to play, here's how you play. It's pretty simple, okay? Here's your key strategies. First of all, you have to win. What you're doing is you're picking an NFL team to win their game each week. In week 1, you pick a team. If they win, you advance to week 2. If they lose, you're out. Now, there's a lot of different Survivor variations. A standard Survivor pool goes through the 18 regular season weeks, and whoever's left standing at the end wins, or you may all split it if there's multiple players. My major pool here runs through the playoffs and Super Bowl, as I said. There are some pools when you get to the end, especially big pools, where you have to pick 2 teams and survive. There's some that make you make a pick like on Thanksgiving or Christmas Day games. So you've got to do a little bit more strategery there in terms of who you save. All right. So there are some different variations, but basically that's it. You got to win, and you can only use each team 1 time. So in a standard pool, you're picking 18 teams over 18 weeks. There's 14 teams that make the playoffs. That means you're most likely picking those 14, and then you got to pick 4 non-playoff teams. So what you really want to do and think about in terms of your strategy is determine when can I use a potential non-playoff team at the least amount of risk, right? So that's point 5 there. Focus versus the worst. Don't worry about taking the best. In other words, last year, I often would pick a team playing against Houston. They were the worst team in the league last year. So there were times when you could potentially pick a non-playoff team playing against Houston and get a victory. And you want to think about it through the process. So by week 9, you want to have your 2 of those teams taken. Ideally, every 4.5 weeks, you're going to pick one of them. Put yourself in the players' minds. Let me tell you what I mean by that. 2 years ago, Green Bay, week 1, went to New Orleans. They were a favorite, and they got smacked. They got destroyed. It was like 38-10 or something like this. Aaron Rodgers was there. And so I actually said my guaranteed pick of the year in week 2 will be Green Bay. There's no way they're going to come back home. They're playing the Bears. Come back home and lose after that debacle. A couple of years ago, Buffalo is rolling along, looks like the best team in football, averaging 30 points a game. They're going down to Jacksonville. This is when Jacksonville was the worst team in the league, and they got Trevor Lawrence as the first pick. So they're going down to Jacksonville, and the Jacksonville players even said it. Buffalo, you could tell their players weren't into the game at all. Buffalo loses the game 9-6 as 15.5-point favorites. They're averaging 30 points a game and scored 6 against one of the worst defenses. So there's a case where, Buffalo gets some key wins, and now in their minds, you could tell you're thinking they might have a letdown this week because they've got some key wins. They may go down with a lackadaisical attitude, and they did. They got beat. In a big pool, here's some tips. Play multiple teams. Do it. Everybody else is. I like to do 6 teams in a really, really big pool. I've seen some people do 12, 15, 20 teams. I don't like when I'm picking the same team in multiple entries in a week. That's just for me, okay? But I would say play at least, say, 3 pools because you don't want to be out in the first couple of weeks and then your season's over. And it's very difficult to get through a whole year picking all winners. And certainly in these big pools, it can be big prizes. So you want to have an opportunity to get there. I say set a budget. And what I mean by that is in my major pool, week 1, you can rebuy. You can revive your pool if you lose. Week 2, you get a second chance as well. You just pay more. And so you want to use your revive strategies. So for example, this year, Jacksonville's at Indianapolis in week 1. You might decide Indianapolis is going to stink this year. I'm going to pick them in week 1. If they win for some crazy reason, great. It's a team that I would never pick again, probably a non-playoff team. If they lose, no big deal. I rebuy that pool, and the team that I've used is Indianapolis, a team I'm never going to use again. You see what I mean? You've used a team, one of your non-playoff teams, gotten them out of the way. Now, I think Jacksonville's going to go in and whoop them. So in week 1, I don't see so much of the revive strategy, but in week 2, you've got Indianapolis playing Houston. Those two teams should be among the bottom 5 in the league. It's a good opportunity to take one. If you get a win, great. You've used a team you're never going to use again. If you get a loss, you rebuy and revive that pool. Does that make sense? Got it, guys? Okay, cool. Some other key things, don't go with the herd. If your pool goes to the Super Bowl, I recommend trying to keep one of your Super Bowl picks so you get to use them twice during the playoffs. It makes it a lot easier for you. Know your trends, use your gut. And then here's something interesting. Be careful looking ahead. Now, Rick Gaiman, he runs Rick Run Good, Run Rick Run. If you type in Run Rick Run on Google or YouTube, he comes up. I think it's rickrungood.com. He's awesome at golf. The guy does some fantastic fantasy golf videos. I played the DFS on FanDuel and DraftKings for the major tournaments in golf, and he has helped me so much. I had 2 situations this year where I was in the top 100 on Sunday. One of my entries finished up there, won a few $100s. The other one slipped back to about 200th place. But he just does a great job with golf, great data mind. But I will say this. So he did a Survivor video, and he went through sort of the gamification, the gaming process, right? Trying to take right now and understanding where is your best place to pick a team based on risk and future risk and these kinds of things, right? But I'm going to tell you, I've been playing Survivor for 30-some years. I'm not going to tell you how long. In all that time, I've just never seen it work, right? I've never seen it work. So, maybe it will. He said he has a pool. You can join his pool too. And he is going to put an entry in that does this. He's basically making all his picks right now throughout the year. And now now that I've said that we'll never win, watch it win. Good luck to him, obviously. But no, in my experience, here's the thing about football. You're talking about 18-week season now. It is absolutely the #1 injury sport in terms of amount injuries per game played, right? So if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt in week 4, are you excited about the Chiefs? When Matthew Stafford went down last year for the Rams, were you playing him? Probably not. So there's all kinds of dynamics that change the NFL. And also, your week 1 bottom 5 may not be the bottom 5 in week 10 or week 17. It can be completely different. There's a lot of things that change through the course of the year in the NFL. So, for example, look at last year. Week 1, Denver was a 6.5-point favorite. We had huge expectations on the Broncos to do well last year with Russell Wilson coming over. 6.5-point favorites at Seattle, and they lost. By week 12, they were still given a 1.5 at Carolina, but they got smacked. Now, let's look at Seattle. Week 1, they were getting 6.5 points at home against Denver. And in week 13, they're giving 6.5 points at the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. right? So look at the Rams. They're your defending Super Bowl champs. Week 2, they're giving 10 points to Atlanta. By weeks 13 and 14, they're getting almost a touchdown at home against Seattle and Vegas. So you can see, if you start doing things at the beginning of the year based on how you're rating teams, your perceptions, predictions, etc., it all changes every year it does this. So I wish them luck, but every time I look ahead, it bites me in the butt. And that's what happened last year with that San Francisco pick. Anyways, hey guys, please like us and subscribe to our channel. Really appreciate it. All right, let's get into some survivor stats that all y'all should have in your brains. Home teams win 55.5% of the time, okay? Against the spread, they're about 47. Last 2 years, though, in week 1, home teams have bombed 43.75%. Now, in our pool, a tie is a loser. If your team ties, you're out. Indy and Houston tied in week 1 last year. So actually, it should be like 14 and 18, and that's where you get the 43.75%. That was both straight up against the spread. Week 1 was a rough week. It's a hard week because you have all the changes, new coaches, new players, new stuff. And it's just hard to figure stuff out in week 1. You just want to get through it, quite honestly. Favorites typically win 2/3 of the time. That means underdogs win 33% of the time. In a 16-game schedule, that means 5 underdogs are going to win outright each week. We'll talk about that a little more in a bit. You can see against the spread, favorites about 46%. Week 1 last year, you could see they struggled too, under 60% straight up, down at 40% against the spread the last 2 years in week 1. Also, the over-under, just so you're aware, week 1 last year was like 5 and 11. Last 2 years now, 12 and 20. The over has only hit 37% of the time in week 1. Typically what's happening is the offenses take a couple of weeks to catch up to the defense. I think why is because we don't start any offensive players in the preseason anymore. And so it's just a little harder for them to get it going versus the defense. So be aware that, the last 2 years we've had lots of unders in week 1. Home favorites and away favorites. Away favorites are pretty much just as good as home favorites. Don't be scared of picking an away team. Now, one thing to note there, in the last 2 years in week 1, you can see home favorites struggled straight up compared to their normal numbers, and they also struggled against the spread. But away favorites held their normal stats. One note, though, both in 2021 and 2022, we had a lot of home dogs, 8 and 10. This year, we're back to more of a normal number with 6 home dogs. Maybe that changes things, right? Remember that Game of Thrones episode, The Red Wedding, right? They had all the killings and the blood everywhere. They call it the Red Wedding. Last year, week 1 Survivor was the Red Week, Red Survivor, whatever you want to call it. It was a bloodbath, right? So you can see we started with 1,440 entries. 908 were eliminated. Over 60% of the pool was gone in week 1. I've never seen that happen before, ever, and I've been playing a long time. One thing to note there, you see the top loss choices, 5 of them over 100 picks. Top win choices, I want you to think of these. Baltimore and Washington were 2 of the top choices. Take a look real quick, week 1 schedule. The 2 biggest favorites are Baltimore and Washington. Could it be deja vu? I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of people on these 2 teams. Here's a little bit more information for you on home and away favorites, okay? Straight up now, home favorites, away favorites, you can see with their point spread ranges, 0 to 3 points. You can see the away favorites actually perform really well, 56%, compared to the home favorites at only 52%. But then you get to 3.5 to 5.5, 6 to 9.5 points. They're pretty much the same. But when you get to 10-point favorites, the home favorites do perform better than the away favorites, and that's the same down below against the spread. You can see those big gaps. Against the spread, home favorites only win 41% of the time. Away favorites win closer to 50% of the time. And then as 10-point favorites, it kind of reverses just like up above, all right? Dogs win 33% of the games overall, period. So each week we go through and do the dog report. We look at every game and identify which games we think the dogs have the best opportunities to win. In your confidence pools, you probably need to think the same way. You're picking 15, 16 games. If you don't have 4, 5, 6 dogs winning, it's going to be a tough week for you. If you have all favorites winning. Now, sometimes there is going to be a week or two during the season when all the favorites come home, but it's rare. We consider an upset to be a team that's getting 6 points or more. That's our main upset category. Now, dogs getting 6 points On average 1.25 upsets per week. So in an 18-week schedule, we should see about 22 of these upsets, okay? Last year, through week 7, we were averaging 2 upsets per week. It was insane, and most of the pools were gone in Survivor. And you can see, though, at the end of the year, we finished down at 1.06 upsets per week, one of the lowest totals we've ever had. Take a look at this. Here are a couple of grids of metrics that I'll keep throughout the year for you. You see the left column shows the metric and its historical values. Then we had the last 2 years, and then what happened during the season last year. We'll track it the same way. You can see most things shook out the same way. This is what we've talked about here the last few minutes. We'll look down there. Thursday night favorites, something to note, typically win 65% of the time straight up. 2 years ago, they went 13-3, over 80% winners. We love that. Why? Love and Survivor. Go pick that Thursday night winner, and now we just root for upsets all weekend. A lot of fun, right? Last year, the Thursday night favorites were 11-3, and then they kind of hit it, dropped down to 12-5, finished at 70%. Will it track back towards the 65% this year? We'll see. Top 5 Survivor pool choices each week. The end of the season, you can see 5-0 the last week of the season last year. They did much better. Early in the season, they had it rough. Only finished at 73% winners. Usually that number's up closer to 80, okay? Now this grid goes against the spread. You can see all the numbers here. A couple of notes. The away favorites struggled last year, down at 45% winners. The over-under, though, this is a big one. Normally through like 4,000 some games, the OU is 50-50, pretty much. It's right at 51-49, 50-50. Last year, the under hit 56% of the time, over only hit 44% of the time. So people love scoring, love DFS, like betting the overs. Be careful. Last year was a huge under year. Will that balance out this year? We'll see. See our upset 6+. We average 1.25 a week. In 2021, we hit a record 31 upsets. We were averaging 1.72 per week. Last year, as I said, we started off hitting over 2 per week, and it dropped all the way back down to 1.06 by the end of the year. 75% of upsets, the dog is away. That means we have a home favorite in 75% of the upsets, all right? 60% of the upsets go under, and these are the 6-point upsets, right? A team's getting 6 points or more. All right, 70% of the upsets, the favorite scores less than 21 points. In 65% of the upsets, about 2/3, the OU is set between 43 and 49.5 points. So if you have a lower OU total or a real high OU total, meaning the favorite probably has a really good defense or a really good Kansas City Chief offense, there's more upsets that occur in that mid-range, okay? Average score in an upset's 25-18. That's both home and away. And you commit turnovers, you're a loser in the NFL. It stands for not for long, right? All right, here's a couple of things to note. We call these Survivor busters and Survivor favorites. Here's what a buster is. You can see in the last 2 years, the Jets are the biggest buster. What does this mean? You can see the first column there, picked and lost. That means people chose the Jets 6 times, and the Jets lost and busted them out of the pool. The next column is the number of times we picked against the Jets, but the Jets won and knocked us out of the pool, okay? So you see the Jets leave with 551 busting your chops. You see Cincinnati, Tennessee, the Giants, Houston, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis are among the leaders there in the last 2 years. So for example, 2 years ago, Cincinnati goes into New York. About 200 people picked Cincinnati. They lost to the Jets and got knocked out, and that's, 200 of those picks are right there in your totals. Now, in our Survivor favorites, you're going to see a couple of teams are also on that list, in particular, Houston and the Jets. Now, why are they our favorites? Houston, let's look at them. First column is they were picked 32 times to win, and they won. That's good. The second column is we picked over 1,900 times against Houston, and they did what we wanted them to do. They lost. So you can see they have 1,951 points of goodness for Survivor. Right? You got it? This is what I mean by picking against the worst, and then at times you're going to pick the best teams, but picking against the worst is probably the better strategy to take. So you can see the first 3 teams, that's picking against the worst. Not necessarily last year for Detroit and the Jets. I have a feeling this year Houston will be picked a lot. Detroit and the Jets both have playoff aspirations this year. The bottom 4 there, Rams, Green Bay, Denver, Buffalo, those were primarily picked to win their games. Of course, the Rams won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, so that's why they were picked quite a bit. Who are our worst teams right now? Who are the worst? This is based on Vegas odds and, of course, people's perceptions. Arizona and Houston are tied as the worst perceived teams right now. Of course, Arizona, Kyler Murray's out for several weeks. They're going to go with starting quarterback Clayton Tune, a rookie. That's going to be tough. Arizona, their offensive line, their defense are ranked pretty low, among the bottom 10. You got a rookie quarterback, and he's not a touted one. It could get ugly for Arizona the first few weeks of the season. Houston has a rookie quarterback, new coach. It's not setting up real well there. Indy, rookie quarterback, new coach. Tennessee has had a great offensive line, a great defense the last few years. That's kind of dipping down now. Washington, Tampa Bay are in there, and then I added in Carolina, the Rams, Chicago, Green Bay, Atlanta, because all those teams are really, really dependent on their quarterbacks, quite honestly. If the quarterbacks show up and play well, those teams can push up. If their quarterbacks kind of bust, they could be in the bottom 5 all year. These are teams that get upset the most. Since 2005, I think this is. Number 1, New Orleans by a mile. The Saints have gotten upset as a 6-point favorite 29 times. You can see the other teams there. I will say this. The Chargers of Minnesota have busted my chops in Survivor more than any other teams. They tend to win games there that they are not supposed to win, but they also lose games they're not supposed to lose. And that's the most frustrating thing for Survivor. Now, here are the teams that pull off upsets the most. The Raiders are number 1 because they lost Vegas 26 times. It's not even close. They upset more teams getting 6 points. In other words, the Raiders are getting 6 points, and they win the game outright. Done it 26 times. Tampa, Tennessee, Washington, the Jets and Giants, and Carolina. In the last 5 years, though, Miami is now number 1. The Jets are right there. And you can see the other teams. Something we look at in week 1, new coaches, all right? Overall, new coaches in their first game in week 1 win 43% of the time. But you can take a look there, 2018 to 21, 5-21. And some of those wins came because they were playing other new coaches. So under 20%, you almost could have just taken anyone against a new coach and won. Last year, though, we had a record 10 new coaches. But here's the 2 key differences. Number 1, you had a lot of experienced coaches. Doug Peterson had won a Super Bowl. Lovie Smith had been to a Super Bowl. And you had 6 of them walking into situations with high playoff expectations. So most years, new coaches come in on bad teams. Last year, they came in on some pretty good teams. They went 7-3. Absolutely an anomaly. This year, we have 3 new coaches only. You can see both Carolina and Houston probably going to struggle early. Denver has Sean Payton, Super Bowl champion coach. And they're actually favored in week 1. But for me, and I like the Broncos, giddy up Broncos, but I'm not going to trust it until I see it. Now, new day 1 quarterbacks is another thing. This one we don't have as much trend information really, but just some notes. Last year they went 4-5. 2 years ago they went 5-7, but I point this out. The veterans went 5-4, pretty good. Rookies went 0-3. Why do I bring that up? This year, new day 1 quarterbacks. You can see our veterans, Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, Garoppolo, Derek Carr, and then Jordan Love's kind of a veteran, I guess. But we absolutely have rookie starters, Anthony Richards, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, and Clayton Tune, 4 rookie starters. They tend not to do very well in week 1. You can probably play against those teams and feel pretty good. Super Bowl winners, how do they perform week 1 of the next season? You can see straight up they go 13-4. That's pretty good. But against spread 9-8, still very respectable. But here's the one thing I want you to note. Kansas City is currently a 6.5-point favorite. Super Bowl winners week 1 that are 6-point favorites and higher are 1-4 against the spread. So more than likely, I like Kansas City to win the game, but I'm probably going to take those points with Detroit. Super Bowl losers struggle a bit. Now you can see straight up, they're only 9-8. And against the spread, 5-12. Look at Philly. They're on the road against a pretty good New England team. Now, remember, New England, remember that crazy play against the Raiders where the running back caught the ball and he starts throwing the ball backwards, the back pitches, and it ends up in a Raiders defensive player's hands. And he takes it for a touchdown and they win. If New England wins that game, they're in the playoffs. And I think they're going to be better this year than they were last year. So that's a pretty tough start for Philly. And Philly is giving 4 points now. You can see Super Bowl losers giving 3.5 points or more are 3-8 against the spread. That doesn't bode so well for Philly. Now, I love Philly. You guys know I love Philly the last 2 years. They're my team. And I will say this. Belichick struggles against running quarterbacks. Last year, Baltimore and Lamar Jackson destroyed them. Justin Fields and the Bears destroyed New England. New England was a heavy favorite that game. That helps Philly there. Let's get into the dog report here. This is where we want to look at where can we identify 5 or 6 dogs that have a good opportunity to win. We want to avoid those games in Survivor. We want to help look at those in conference pools. Home dogs, I like Cleveland. Cincinnati, I'm a big Cincinnati guy. I love Joe Burrow, one of my favorite players. But Cleveland beat Cincinnati at home last year. Cincinnati, game 1 last year, got smoked. Burrow threw 4 interceptions and was awful. I think Cleveland is being underrated this year. Their offensive line is going to be one of the best in the league. Their defense still has the potential to be a top 10 defense. Deshaun Watson is now out of all that craziness from last year and ready to go. Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, they should be just fine. I like Cleveland to get this one done. All right, the next one there is Pittsburgh. 2 years ago, Buffalo came in at home to play Pittsburgh in week 1. Buffalo had been in the conference title game and lost to the Chiefs. Pittsburgh beats them straight up. Buffalo was a heavy favorite. Last year, Cincinnati comes off a Super Bowl loss. Week 1 plays Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh beats them straight up. Now you have San Francisco coming in off a conference championship game. I don't trust them. Mike Tomlin seems to get it done. I think Pittsburgh could win this game. The Jets and Buffalo, the Jets are at home. There's huge amounts of excitement around Aaron Rodgers coming in. That defense was great last year. And everybody figures you add in Aaron Rodgers where the team had its one weakness at quarterback, and they should be much improved. And they should. But, I kind of like to see it first to believe it. The Jets could easily beat them as a dog. Down below in the road dogs, Green Bay and Chicago. Chicago was one of the 5 worst defenses last year. I don't see it all of a sudden becoming a top 10 defense. So I think Green Bay will be fine and score some points. It's a toss-up in my book. It's only a 1-point game anyway. Vegas and Denver. Vegas is just as good as Denver. And now Vegas has at least a little bit of continuity, although they have the new quarterback. Russell Wilson was god-awful last year. I don't know how he could be worse. So hopefully Sean Payton comes in and fixes that situation. And maybe Denver will be a lot better. But right now, I don't trust that at all. And like we said, the Raiders are one of the top teams in terms of pulling off upsets. And then Miami and the Chargers. Last time we watched Justin Herbert, he was blowing a 27-point lead. I think it was 27, something like that. In the meantime, Miami, when they had Tua playing, they were one of the best offenses and teams going until he got hurt. So I don't necessarily trust the Chargers. I think Miami can win that game. So those are the dogs that I think should do pretty well. Let's check out who's in play for Survivor this week. Week 1, number 1 is obvious, Baltimore. You got Lamar Jackson seems happy with his contract. They've added some talent at receiver for him. Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers, rookie. Rashad Bateman should have a breakout season. J.K. Dobbins is healthy week 1 and should have a breakout season for them. Mark Andrews is still there. On defense, you got a rookie quarterback coming in. And last year, after the Ravens acquired Roquan Smith, they became a top 10 defense. I think that continues this year. I think the Ravens pretty much whoop Houston. Washington, Arizona. We're talking about a rookie quarterback for Arizona named Clayton Tune. There were a lot of rookie quarterbacks people were excited about. He wasn't really one of them. Not saying he can't be good, but I think it's a tall order. And Washington should do just fine. They won in week 1 last year, and I expect them to do it again. Jacksonville at Indy. If you want to play a rebuy strategy, this might be the game to do it. Anthony Richardson. Let me tell you something. Running quarterbacks can make a much better impression early in their careers in the NFL than passing quarterbacks. I can totally see Anthony Richardson pulling it down and taking off far more often than he should, but he probably could be a spectacular runner, make some huge plays, so it's a wild card, right? Especially in week 1. Maybe they do pull off an upset. Jonathan Taylor won't play. And Jacksonville's offense was firing on all cylinders at the end of the season last year, so I do expect Jacksonville to come in and score some points. And I'm going to take Jacksonville. Number 4, Kansas City. We talked about Super Bowl champs coming back and winning in week 1, 13-4. KC's at home. Detroit's defense was one of the 5 worst in the league last year. Even if they improve, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Gate. The only thing that's scary now is I've heard Travis Kelce might not play. That definitely makes it a little scary, so they might not be a 4 here if that's the case. Interesting. All right, Tampa Bay at Minnesota. Tampa Bay, now, Baker Mayfield is right where Mitch Trubisky was last year, okay? He's in his prime. He's getting an opportunity to start. Last year, Trubisky didn't take advantage of it. By week 5 or 6, Kenny Pickett was in there, and he took it over and ran with it, and Trubisky's basically relegated to be a backup for his career now. Baker Mayfield's in the same spot. He's getting in a good team. Yeah, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, although Evans may not play for a contract, I guess. So the offense has some decent players. The defense is still pretty good in Tampa. But it's Baker Mayfield's time to shine, right? He had the one season in Cleveland where he took the team to the playoffs, and he was great. He almost beat Kansas City. He had him in the ropes there in the playoffs. Won his first playoff game there, too. So if that's the Baker Mayfield we get, Tampa Bay might turn out to be pretty good this year. But if he plays like he has maybe in recent years, it could be a struggle for them. At least in this game, Minnesota brings back Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson, Madison still there. It's the same team they had last year. Their defense wasn't very strong. Brian Flores comes in to hopefully shore that up. But the offense should score points. And I think Minnesota can easily get this win. Here's your possibles. Now, I put Atlanta at number 6. Carolina has a rookie quarterback. Atlanta has Desmond Ridder, who doesn't have a lot of experience, but he has more than Bryce Young does at Carolina. Atlanta's offensive line is rated among the top 10. Their defense is improving. I think Atlanta probably gets this win at home. Number 7, I put Dallas. Look, guys, Giants, you guys did great last year. But Philly, Dallas, and the Giants and Washington had the easiest schedules in the NFL last year. All right. This year, the Giants have a hard schedule. So it's going to be hard for them to advance in terms of number of wins over last year. And I think Dallas clearly has more talent and depth on their roster than the Giants are probably going to whoop them. But if there is a game where the Giants can pull that upset, Monday night at home, or it's Sunday night actually, Sunday night at home against one of your arch rivals, that's a big game. I wouldn't play it for Survivor. We're going to get Dallas later on this year in better spot. Team number 8, I put Seattle. Again, the Rams, I don't know if Cooper Kupp's playing or not. So for the Rams, if you have Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Cam Akers, man in the backfield, he was great at the end of the year last year, then you give the Rams a chance, right? Their offensive line's not as good as the Super Bowl year. Their defense is not as good as the Super Bowl year, so they are down there. But if Stafford, Kupp, or Akers are out, I think the Rams struggle big time this year, so Seattle should do okay there. Philly at New England. I love Philly. Like I said, running quarterbacks give Belichick a difficult time, so be careful there. But on the other hand, I think New England's going to be better than they were last year, and they always have a good defense. Number 10, New Orleans. Tennessee, you got Tannehill. DeAndre Hopkins comes in to help them out at wide receiver. Derrick Henry's still there. But Tennessee's defense, their offensive line have kind of gone down a notch in terms of the rankings. New Orleans has had a top 10 defense 8 years in a row. Derek Carr comes in. Michael Thomas might actually decide to play this year. Kamara's out a couple of games, but Jamal Williams is in the backfield. So New Orleans at home, they should take care of business there. And then Denver, I put them at 11. Hopefully Sean Payton gets that ship righted quickly. But there again, that's kind of a toss-up. I wouldn't play it for Survivor. And then the riskies, we already talked about all 5 of these games. There's just no way I'm touching any of these for Survivor purposes. So here's my picks this week in the primary pool. Like I said, I'm going to go with 6 teams. I've had people do 10, 12 teams. In that situation, you're probably picking multiple entries with the same team. I'm doing it once here. I've got Baltimore listed on Team 1 and Team 6. I don't like doing that. But in this Week 1, it's survive and get through. Week 1 is so hard. You just want to survive and get through. And I think I've got 5 that can do it. And that's how I'm going to play it. Let's take a look at my 5 picks for this week for you wagerers out there. Here's a quick review of last year. Team records against the spread. You can see the Giants, Cincinnati, Detroit were great. Chargers were good. Tampa and Chicago were god-awful. In the over-under world, you can see we had very few teams have winning records to the over. Minnesota, Detroit, and Chicago were 3 of the 5 worst defenses in the league, and that's why they played a lot of overs, and all 3 of those teams could score. On the underside, look at that. We have 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that hit the under at least 11 times last year. That is a lot. Last year, I did a video on my top 10 picks for the Super Bowl. So here's a quick review. So I haven't had a chance to brag about it because I had a good day. Went 9-3, so my 10 turned into 12. You can go back and watch that video to see all the reasons why I picked these things. I had a great Super Bowl. Loved it. All right, who's our top 5 plays for Week 1? Here's what I'm looking at now. Just a note. Last 2 years, unders and dogs have dominated in Week 1. So, of course, my first play, Green Bay, Chicago, over. Actually, the way I look at it is, I think Chicago's defense will be improved. but I don't think they're going to be that good still. I think both these teams are going to get out of the gate with some points and score, and I think that's a low enough total to easily hit the under there, or hit the over there. I'd like Jordan Love to hit his over rushing yard total. Only problem is I haven't seen it. Baltimore -10. Now, last year, Baltimore went out in week 1 and just clocked the Jets like 22-7. I expect them to do the same thing to Houston here. I think they'll get out of the gate in a big way. I don't like giving 10 points usually, but in this situation, I just feel like Baltimore's going to romp them. Cleveland plus the 2.5, there's a dog. They beat Cincinnati last time in Cleveland, and I think Cleveland's being overlooked this year. I love Cincinnati. Cleveland's freaking good. Cincinnati stunk in week 1 last year, so I'm going to gamble on Cleveland. And I'm going to take the Jacksonville team total over 24.5. I know Indy has a decent defense, but the Jags offense was on fire at the end of last year. Trevor Lawrence is playing well. Everybody's back. And you add in Calvin Ridley. I think the Jags are going to score a lot of points this year, so I like that. Now, my bonus bets, I don't really have a lot this week. It's a tough week. But I do. Most rookie quarterbacks in their first game throw an interception. It's up at like 70 or 80% of the time. And so, with 4 rookie quarterbacks, I'd probably bet each one and hope you go 3-1 and win some money there. But I don't know. We'd have to see the odds. I haven't seen those numbers at all. And I do like their rushing total overs. Certainly, probably Anthony Richardson. I think he'll pull the ball down and take off more than he should. Rookie quarterbacks have to understand the speed of the game in the NFL, the tight windows you're throwing in compared to college. DBs are all over these guys, and you've got to be accurate. So, I think they'll throw an interception. I think they'll take off and run more than they should. So I like those. I just haven't seen the numbers. I like those dogs. Vegas, New England, Pittsburgh, Miami, Green Bay. I'm not sure I'll take them all, but right now I'm thinking about it. I kind of like them. And then the Kansas City-Detroit over. Now, last year, week 1, like I said, it was 11-5 unders. There were a lot of low-scoring games, but the 2 high-scoring games, Philly-Detroit hit 73. Kansas City-Arizona hit like 65. And now you got Kansas City-Detroit. 2 good offenses. Defenses, Detroit's isn't very good. Kansas City's without Chris Jones. I think both teams are going to score some points. I know it's 54. It's a huge number on opening night. It scares me a bit, but I'm going to have to go over on that one. Those are 2 of the teams that actually scored in week 1 last year. So anyways, those are my picks for this year. Here are my picks in the primary pool for Survivor. Hey guys, I hope you liked the show. Hope you'll come back and be with us. They won't be as long as this one in the future. Thanks to Cooper Groove, CooperGroove.com, our sponsor. Please go check out their drumsticks, their baseball bats, their golf grips. This has been Survivor 2023, Week 1. Picking winners with the Cheezeman. Good luck. We hope you survive.